Hello and welcome to this quick guide on how to put together some slippery physics gameplay for your game in Crayta. To start with, I have this oil slick which I want to be an obstacle in my game, and it should be a slippery oil slick. This is a separate, if you look, this is a separate voxel mesh from the terrain. And the reason being, I want to be able to use the oil slick, the oil spill. I want to use the on collision event for that. The way I hooked up slippery physics, and there's lots of different ways to do this, is essentially take the on collision event and add a script to this oil slick. And when a player collides with the oil slick, I run the function trigger slippery, which essentially sends an event to the player called on hit slippery. When the player receives that, it will try and run on hit slippery on any script that's attached to our player template. So I've added this script folder called slippery player and a script within there called slippery player script. Within slippery player script, the on hit slippery function is here. So when this runs, this line of code runs, which occurs when the player collides with the voxel mesh, it sends an event, and then this function gets called because on hit slippery is the same as on hit slippery here. Essentially what we do now is we take the player's velocity when they first hit the oil slick, we add a little bit of vertical force as well, vertical speed, and then after that, and we set self.slippery to true, which means that in the onTick function, which is called every single frame by Crayta, it checks if we have hit something slippery, so if we're slipping, as in this boolean is true, and our speed is less than 700, then apply a force in the direction that we were traveling when we first hit the oil slick. So it makes it a bit challenging to change direction or stop. It's quite a fun thing to add to an obstacle course, because it's a bit of a different obstacle and it forces players to think about how they approach the obstacle rather than what to do when they're in the obstacle. To stop that slippery force being applied, I added the slippery script to the terrain and hooked up the on collision event to a different event called stop slippery. So rather than trigger slippery, which fires the on hit slippery event, stop slippery fires the on hit non-slippery event. And then I've hooked into that in the same slippery player script here and literally just turn off self.slippery. So making self.slippery false means that this is no longer true, which means that we don't fire the player in that direction anymore. So we stop trying to launch the player in that direction. So when you hit the oil slick, it will try and fire the player in that direction as long as their speed is below a certain amount. And when you hit dry land, you don't have to worry anymore and it will stop doing that. This is one approach to doing this, and it's really about making something that's a bit different, a bit interesting, and feels more challenging to control your player. It's not an exact simulation of what would happen on an oil slick, and there's still a couple of bugs that I'd like to iron out. But I hope that this script has offered a little bit of inspiration, and maybe you could take this further, or you could experiment with the idea of slippery physics and how to approach this problem. I really look forward to seeing how you do it in Crayta.